All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Donald Trump's now infamous phone call to Georgia's top election official to find him 11,780 votes to enable him, not Joe Biden, to win the state will go down as one of the most shocking moments in the aftermath of the November 2020 election.
And I won this election by hundreds of thousands of votes. There's no way I lost Georgia. There's no way.
But he did lose narrowly and was told countless times by Brad Raffensperger, Georgia's Secretary of State, on that call that there was no fraud.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
But Trump just wouldn't listen.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
Trump's 67-minute call would spark an investigation which last night, around midnight, culminated in the latest sprawling criminal indictment against him, this time from prosecutors in Georgia.
The indictment brings felony charges against Donald John Trump.
A statement about a former president of the United States that perversely no longer has the same wow factor you might expect, given it's the fourth such criminal indictment in almost as many months. This time, prosecutors employed Georgia's unusual racketeering law, typically used to go after mob bosses, to implicate Mr. Trump and 18 others who, they claimed, had engaged in a criminal enterprise with one singular focus:
to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21. I am giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon on Friday, the 25th day of August, 2023.
The sweeping charges presented to the court include spreading lies about election fraud, soliciting a public officer to violate their oath, conspiring to commit forgery, and creating false electoral documents. The latter relates to the so-called fake electors scheme, allegedly a plan by Trump and his allies to organise fraudulent lists of electors in Georgia and other states and force them to falsely certify the election for Trump instead of Biden. Multiple fake electors were among those indicted last night, including this Republican official, seen here in blue, who was also charged for her role in aiding operatives of Donald Trump to enter an election office in Georgia where voting machines were illegally breached. And then there was this infamous CCTV footage that Trump claimed showed two election workers, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, secretly stuffing ballot boxes in Georgia with false votes for Joe Biden. He was told that wasn't true, but prosecutors claim he repeated the allegation anyway and harassed them in the process.
Ruby Freeman, she's a vote scammer, a professional vote scammer and hustler.
Trump's response to the latest charges was to call Georgia's district attorney a rabid partisan who is prosecuting President Trump through these bogus indictments to try and maximally interfere with the 2024 presidential race and damage the dominant Trump campaign. But the great irony is that none of these criminal charges appear to be damaging Trump at all. Certainly not among the faithful.
It's unfair, it's unjust. Again, there's a double standard in this country. The media, for the most part, is only presenting one side of the story.
It's a political
glad.
witch hunt, but that's
I
what
don't agree. I think he has committed crimes and he should have to pay for them.
Yeah, it's a Joe
As
Biden will
any
too.
American citizen should.
Clearly, he's done some things that are wrong, and he needs to answer to that. So, yeah, it's great.
I challenged the election in Georgia, which I have every right to do, which I was right about, frankly.
You might think 4 indictments in, there'd be a hint of humility. Not Donald Trump. Instead, he's doubling down and said he plans next week to present irrefutable evidence about the election fraud in Georgia that should, he claims, lead to his complete exoneration. Well, add Donald Trump's 13 new charges today to the other 3 criminal indictments against him, and that's a total of 91 felony counts, 9-1, and all of them very serious. Remember that he allegedly paid hush money to an adult film actress to keep her quiet. Those espionage charges related to the alleged removal and retention of top secret and classified documents, a conspiracy to defraud the United States, no less, for allegedly overturning the results of the 2020 election, and today's sweeping racketeering case. No wonder there is indictment fatigue in this country, because people are questioning whether any of these 91 counts will actually stick. And that is why this case in Georgia is seen as so key today, because unlike the other federal cases out against him, which Donald Trump could simply throw out or pardon himself if he were to become president again, he has no power to do that with these state charges, which means if he is tried and convicted and found guilty and sentenced, then Donald Trump could end up going to prison for a very long time, and there is nothing that he can do about it.
Siobhan in Washington, thanks very much indeed. Well, Donald Trump now faces 4 separate trials involving dozens of criminal charges, as you just heard, and prosecutors want court cases to begin around the same time as the 2024 presidential election campaign kicks off in earnest. The New York court case is set to start in March. A complicated year, to put it mildly. A presidential campaign is a marathon, an expensive one. Speeches, addresses, meet and greets. The life of a presidential wannabe is a slog lasting at least a year.
It's a lot of travel, it's a lot of time, and you're literally crisscrossing the country trying to get your campaign off and running.
As Donald Trump knows only too well, his campaign for the Republican nomination ahead of the 2016 election, 187 stops across the country, a further 138 after he received the Republican nomination. In 2020, a more moderate 94 rallies across the states.
And we are going to win 4 more years in the White House.
But this time, he's fighting on 2 fronts.
President Trump is the clear frontrunner in this race, but we still have a ways to go. It's going to come down to how Americans view this. And you're going to have different Americans viewing this a different way in terms of the indictments taking shape around former President Trump.
4 court cases across the country, jeopardy on a map. In New York, where alleged hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels may have breached election spending rules. In Florida, where Donald Trump's refusal to return a stash of top-secret documents led to 40 charges, including under the Espionage Act. Then in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, Trump faces 3 charges of conspiracy relating to the events leading up to the Capitol riot on January the 6th, 2021. And now in Georgia, where Donald Trump and 18 allies are accused of using a criminal enterprise to try and overturn the 2020 election result in that state. A very hectic schedule for anyone, let alone a 77-year-old on a mission to win back the White House and reclaim America's highest office. But this election really will be like no other in US history. Donald Trump's plane will burn up air miles flitting from campaign rallies to court appearances. His campaign will burn up precious dollars paying for all those lawyers in 4 separate cases. It'll be like no other election envisaged by the founding fathers, who'd forgotten to write into the Constitution that a convicted felon should be disbarred from the highest office, probably because they thought it wasn't necessary. But Trump has increased his poll numbers amongst fellow Republicans with every indictment, and now probably sees a return to the White House as his best chance of staying out of jail. Just let that thought sink in for a while.
Many polls show former President Trump is only gaining further momentum in the national polls, particularly among Republican voters. And if you look at the state-based polling, such as in a key state like Iowa, that polling shows right now former President Trump with nearly a double-digit lead among many polls in that state.
However extraordinary Trump's self-inflicted dilemmas may be, most of the other candidates haven't had the courage to call him out. They're hoping that the courts will do their work for them. So a question that no one thought in their right minds would ever need to be asked. Can a presidential candidate, i.e. Donald Trump, pull off the unprecedented and win an election from a courtroom or even a jail cell? Well, Jill Wine-Banks is a lawyer who served as one of the special prosecutors during the Watergate scandal, and she joins me now from Chicago. Jill, good to have you back on the program. So let's start with the question that I ended my piece on. Can a presidential candidate, i.e. Donald Trump, win this election from a courtroom or even a jail cell?
Legally, yes. There's nothing in the Constitution that bars even a convicted felon from running for office. And there was an example in our past. Eugene Debs in the 20s ran from a jail cell. Can he politically, as a matter of fact, win? I'm afraid it's possible. And it's up to the Democrats to get out the vote to make sure that it doesn't happen. And I am hopeful that the trial will end up being televised, although current federal rules prohibit that.
Okay.
I think if people see it, it would make a difference.
Now, the trial in Georgia can be televised, can't it? Because trials tend to be televised there unless somehow Trump's lawyers manage to overrule that.
Yes, they probably would be. We saw that in action yesterday when the indictment was handed up to the judge. There were cameras there. And it does make a big difference on how people perceive the evidence. And I think voters need to see the same admissible evidence that will be seen by a jury so that they can make their own informed opinion of his guilt or innocence.
Now, we know that the Georgia prosecutor wants this trial to take place in the next 6 months. What can Trump's legal team do in order to delay this trial for as long as possible?
They will start filing motions. They will probably ask for a change of venue from Georgia to a federal court. They've already suggested that they were going to ask for a transfer to West Virginia, which has no connection to any of the activities in this case and will never be granted. But they can start making motions that will delay the trial. Mm-hmm. They will do everything in their power to delay, because based on the evidence that we have seen already publicly, he will be convicted in all 4 cases. They are very clear sets of evidence that show his guilt, and some of them are recorded. You played part of the Raffensperger conversation where he specifically asked, and he is continuing to commit crimes
just on that,
now.
Just on that conversation with Raffensperger, I mean, I guess his lawyers would say, you know, he wasn't forcing the guy to do this. It was kind of wishful thinking. It was a request that was issued, albeit an absurd one.
Well, it was absurd, but he also said to him, it's going to get you in criminal trouble if you don't take care of this. So that is a threat. He was the sitting president at the time he said that. So he had powers. That was definitely, I would say, a jury will find that was a threat to a witness that was trying to force him to do something. Plus, you see it in the context of the overall conspiracy with all its other moving parts, and you know that it wasn't just a request.
And briefly, I mean, you know, we're learning things every week, frankly, in American law and politics. Is it true that it's impossible for him to pardon himself, even if he was elected president, from a jail cell in Georgia?
He can't pardon himself from a conviction in Georgia under Georgia statute. And incidentally, neither can the governor of Georgia, because that was taken away many years ago and given to a special commission with very limited powers. It cannot pardon anyone until after they have served their full sentence and paid back all their fines. That can never happen during his presidency if he should be reelected.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Jill Wine-Banks, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm happy to say that Greg Swenson, chairman of the UK chapter of Republicans Overseas, is in the studio with me. So are you prepared to see possibly the future President Donald Trump, you know, turning the Oval Office into a small rectangular room with bars? Are you okay with that as a Republican?
Well, I hope he doesn't go to jail, and I wouldn't, in most cases, I wouldn't want to see any president go to jail Republican or Democrat. I don't think he's going to jail, but there's no doubt there's a possibility with all these indictments.
It looks pretty serious, doesn't it?
Yeah, but there's always discretion that a prosecutor or a judge can use and not send a 78-year-old to jail. And they do it all the time, even with other violent felons.
But, you know, he faces 4 serious court cases, you know, 3 of them more serious than the one in New York, arguably, really serious stuff. He's going to divide his time between the campaign trail and court appearances. Surely a Republican like you would just say to him at this stage, Mr. Trump, give it up already.
Yeah, but he doesn't listen to advice. He's never been very good at
And are you okay with that? I mean, you could sink your party, frankly.
Oh, no, I would absolutely prefer that he was not running for office. You know, there was a time where he was only up a few points over the competition, notably Ron DeSantis, but these indictments have really turbocharged him. So I might not agree with the indictments or the sort of double standard that we're seeing with the justice system, but I can also criticize Trump because I think he's behaved poorly, to say the least, criminal or not. There's enough reasons not to vote for him. And it's the one thing I can agree with our last guest.
But, you know, we've spoken quite a lot over the last year, and you've changed your tune a bit like, you know, the guy you like, Ron DeSantis. You know, you weren't critical at all of Trump and the charges at first, and now you are.
Well,
so what's changed?
No, I was critical of the charges. I didn't think he should have been charged, especially on the Alvin
But
Bragg
the fact that he was actually in court.
Right.
You weren't critical of that. But you were calling it a witch hunt too.
Well, and I do think to many degrees it is. And I could surely say, if you know, that Robert Jackson pointed this out in 1940, Matt. He was the Attorney General of the United States, and he said in a speech, he said, the most dangerous power that prosecutors have is picking the guy and then finding a crime for the guy or the man, right? So, you know, that's not really a good sign and that's exactly what's happening now. They said, get Trump. This prosecutor in Atlanta, just like Alvin Bragg in New York, Willis is their name, ran as get Trump candidates.
Right, but when does the Republican Party rediscover its moral spine, and stand up to Donald Trump?
Many have, but it's not up to the party.
But not many of the candidates, frankly.
Yes, they have. You're seeing a lot more criticism.
Some of them.
I mean, starting with Chris Christie, of course. But no, there has been criticism of the Trump. They have to run a fine line. Look, Trump has a lot of support in the party. If these indictments didn't happen, then this would be a completely different situation. But you're seeing the criticism now. Mike Pence, Ron DeSantis.
Just very briefly, you represent the Republicans overseas in the UK. Aren't you embarrassed by what's happening?
Yes. I'm embarrassed at what's happening on both sides of the aisle. The Trump's behavior for sure, the double standard in the justice system, the Biden family cartel is embarrassing, and it should be embarrassing for both parties.
Okay, leave it there. Greg Svensson, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.